animatronic. I'm convinced that that's not really Keith Richards anymore. But it's really amazing. So that would be the third character, definitely. But I will say this very importantly: I love small characters. There are hammy voice actors who I will not name that only ever want to play the lead. One, that's more money because we get paid by the number of hours we record. Two, more popularity. But as I was just telling somebody, like, I only ever wanted to play one of the two twins in Oran. They're fun. They're troublemakers. They're always in trouble, and they're always up to something. That's fun. The lead in that show is an ass. I would never want to play that character. I am not that person, and I can't even enjoy pretending to be that person. There are other shows. There's a show that I just did that I wish to God I could tell you about because it's killing me that nobody even knows the show is coming out, and I worked on it. But it was such a tiny role in the show, but a death unlike any death imaginable. And the director, when we were all auditioning for the show, the director's a really cool guy. I'll tell you who the director is, because he's also the director of Black Butler, which for some ungodly reason got blamed by the Brits last month. I don't know why that happened. Well, here's the weird thing about that. I think it was a choreographed attack on the Funimation page, because you can't watch the YouTube channel in England. You cannot watch it in England. And that's something my friends realized when they went to England. They're like, oh my God, there's no Hulu here. There's no YouTube, or the YouTube sucks here. Because everything's region locked, so you can't watch it. So, anyway, regardless, the cool thing about that director, it's Ian Sinclair, who also plays one of my favorite villains in Borderlands. He plays, I never can think, the dude on top of the salt mining thing. The reason I did this, I wasn't pointing to you, the character's like, you, and it closes in on him, and he's like, Flint. He plays Baron Flint in Borderlands, one of the big villains you have to fight towards the end of the game. So it's cool for me, because I'm a nerd, and that's, to me, Baron Flint, and not my friend Ian. I'm like, wow, you're that guy. But when we were auditioning for the show, there were a bunch of male leads in the show. And he's like, you know, the way we audition, we get a book that has characters in it, and lines from the show, and we pick 3 that we want to audition for. And sometimes if we feel strongly about 4, not 5 or 6, because there's some actors that will audition for everything if you've let them. And I auditioned for 2. I found I'm very realistic about what my voice can do. If it's a romantic soldier, like military guy, it's never going to be me, ever. This is not that voice. People were surprised when I did Neri Madaikon Brothers because of that low, growly voice, but my brother based that on my voice hungover, so there's that. He's like, have you ever heard my brother early in the morning? He sounds like Wolfman Jack. And so that's kind of why, and the director, the producer actually fought him on that decision. He thought my brother had given me the role because I was his brother. And he's like, no, there's nobody else that has a high enough singing voice, because Hideki has an unbelievably high singing range to have such a, kind of voice. So, crap, I derailed myself. How did I start talking about Hideki?
Deep voice.
Deep voice. Oh, realistic about character. Thank you. I'm not ADD at all, am I? I'm glad that you can keep track of that. I can't. I'm like, where was I going? So I'm very realistic, and I only saw 2 characters that were worthy of an audition, because there were 2 like high school type, age, and one was kind of like spiky-haired, like, yeah, I'll get you kind of guy. So I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that. And when we were done, he goes, I really like those reads, but can I tell you about a problem I have? And I was like, you can tell me whatever you like. You're the director. He's like, you're my boss. And he's like, there's a character in this show that I love that is the type of character that you play very often. And he's like, and the thing is, however much it's just like a bunch of other characters you've played, which would be Wham, which I love playing that character, because I'll tell that story in a minute. But he said his story doesn't end up that way. His story ends up very, very dark and very defiant and very mouse giving bald eagle the finger. Like, just like, you think so? Here's the way it's going to be. And I was like, yeah. And he goes, and I've not let anyone read this role. He's like, because I can only imagine you doing this role. And I was like, I will fetch. Let's see this. And we read it, and after reading the dialogue is so juicy. Like, it's so, by juicy, I don't mean like dirty. It's like good. It's like really amazing lines. And after that, I didn't want to play anybody else in that show. The thing is, that character is like this big. But when I can finally talk about it, I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you some more about it, but I can't talk about anything. But the point is, I don't always like the lead, because the lead doesn't always tell the best story, or the lead's not always interesting to me. Like, there's some shows that the lead guy is like in Fushigi Yugi, I would only ever want to play Chichiri. If it was a million years ago and I can only play one person, I would want to play the funny off guy. So that was a really long answer for very, very normal question. So I know you had a question when we first started. No, did I lose it?
Exact same question.
Oh, very cool. Oh, wow, that's amazing. I'm sorry. That's cool. Yeah.
Was there a character that you missed out on playing that you really wanted to?
This is going to let me say something horribly snarky that I was saying. Yes, Son Goku in Sayuki Reload and Sayuki Reload Gunlock. It's not a mystery that the original cast was pretty angry about the way that was handled, because there was a decision made to actually not use us because it was going to be done in California, and therefore they wanted to give California people work. But the problem is, and it was something that I knew immediately, once fans get used to something, they don't like it changed. And I was like, I was so in love with that show, I would have done it for free. I have friends that live in California. I'd go crash on Talisman Sofa or something. But the fact is, they never even gave us a chance to even audition for the roles. And that happened to us again later with a very big show, a show called Gurren Lagann, or as everyone else calls it, Gurren Lagann. We had the rights to that show. ADV had the rights to that show. The cast was announced. Josh Greeley, who has the lead in, in a bunch of things now, but at the time, the only thing anybody had seen him in was The Wallflower. He was playing Simon. And we all had finished, I think, the first disc, even, when the rights were pulled and given to someone else. And the thing is, several of the people called and said, look, I would be interested in auditioning for this role, and they were never even given a chance. It's really tough. It's very tough to have a role taken away from you or not ever be given the chance. But the thing about that is, for me at least, and this is something that a lot of the people I work with don't get, I've been acting since I was a kid, and that's part of being an actor. Like, you don't get everything you want. You don't get to do every role you want. And as much as I would like to think that I am the only English-speaking person to do Son Goku, how many Romeos and Juliets have there been? How many times has that story been retold? So the only show outside of that, the only show I've ever wanted to audition for, but I knew I would not get the chance to because of who had the rights to it, I wanted to audition for Wolf's Rain really bad. I would have loved to have played Hige. But I'm at least excited that my friends are in it and that somebody I really love directed it. So, that's enough. As long as I know it's in good hands, I should be okay with that. What I don't like is when I like a show a lot and the people working on it don't care about it. That's something I have a real problem with. And that happens more often than you believe. More often than you believe. It's one of the hardest things about being a fan and being in the industry. Sometimes I'll be working on a show that I love, and they're like, here's this bleep. This is the daytime panel. I can't say the thing that we would say at night. And I'm like, hey, people love this show. And that's their reaction. So I have a bigger problem with people not caring about the show. That's why I love working with people like my brother and Ian Sinclair and, Chris Bevins, the person that directed Sam 7. I love working with directors that are excited about the show and are like all nerdy about, when we were doing Chrono Crusade, Matt Greenfield loved telling me all his useless 1930s slang that was funny to him. And while some of it was super corny, I knew my director was totally into that show, and I felt comfortable with that. So, but as much as I get disappointed with some things, it's part of my job. There are some actors that I work with that are embarrassing how shameless they are that, why didn't you let me audition for this? I was the only person right for this. And I'm like, whoo, who are you, princess? You know, like, like it's really funny that part of being an actor is sometimes you think you're right for the part. How many of you have been to the beach ever? And seen someone wearing something totally inappropriate? That person thinks that song looks wonderful on them. And maybe not to you. The same with acting. I think that I might be perfect for some role. And in my mind, but directors are trained to hear things. A perfect example is Dean Angel. It was no mystery when we were auditioning that I only wanted to play Daisuke. Only. I only wanted to play that role. And I even made a joke about it, because Kevin Korn, the guy that eventually got the role, beat me for my very first role in anime. It was a role in the show Spriggan. And they were looking for a young voice that could play a villain. And it was me and a 10-year-old auditioning for the role of a 10-year-old. And I had the nerve to mad dog him during the last auditions. I was sitting across from him like... And I thought to myself, I'm like, dude, you're in your 30s making faces at a 10-year-old. Like, get a grip. So, the funny thing is when we were auditioning, I made a joke that if Kevin Korn disappeared, that you should look in small shallow graves in my backyard. And I was just kidding. But the funny thing is, Kevin never warmed up to me. Like I'm like, hey, Kevin, how's it going? Oh, hi. Like, I'm sure it probably has to do with the fact that there's this adult, like, oh yeah, I'll bury him in my backyard if I have to. But the funny thing about that is, and Kevin's voice is lower than mine. Like, speaking voice is lower than mine. But when I listened to the scene where Satoshi is being super creepy yaoi guy, like rubbing his arms and like whispering in his ear, it like totally made sense to me why those characters were cast that way. Yeah, my voice is higher than his, but I don't sound innocent. Like, I can completely sound sneaky, conniving, creepy, yaoi, like, and even though my voice is higher, Kevin sounded younger in spirit. And so only watching that show did I realize why it was fair that I didn't get the role that I wanted. So, like, it's interesting because it's about perception. But that's why you have to get used to not getting the role. Plus, there's always a million people that want to act. And only a few people get to. Yeah?
One other question.
Huh?
Sorry. I lost it.
Okay. There'll be, you'll remember it in a second. Yeah.
Probably can't say anything about this, but can you say anything about Ava 2.22?
Wow, can you guess that's a hugely sore subject with me?
Yeah.
I love the original, I'll say that. That's what I say when I autograph it. I'm like, oh, I love the original. And for fear of making one of the companies I work for mad, I'll leave it at that. And if you spot me at a bar, I might tell you how I really feel about it. But it's again one of those things that once you have become bound to a role, or a role is important to you, having that role taken away from you is a really personal thing, and especially when there's not a really good reason given for it. The weird thing is, I guess it's the legacy of that character. Like, if I want to be a good sport about it, Powder has never been played by the same person twice. Like, it was and here's the weird thing. I know every single person that has done the role of Powder, which is super weird because they're like... Hal Sturdivant, who I know through the Houston theater scene, was the original in the TV broadcast version. In the movies that manga did, manga distributing, my friend Aaron Crone, whose mother was one of my first dance teachers, random, then myself, I know myself, and Jerry Jewell, who is a dear, dear friend of mine, and if you ever needed good company at a bar, that's the funniest person you could ever hang out with, is the new voice of Kaudu. So I think it's only fitting that we find a new one, because it's never been the same person too many times. But you'll notice that I wasn't the only person present recast, because Monica was not Maya either. So it's just really weird. And to me, it's like Sam 7. There are some things that you don't alter, and to me, Evangelion is just one of those things you really shouldn't toy with. But in all fairness, my other opinion about Evangelion is I think that Gynax should tell a new story. And stop focusing on Evangelion because that story's been told and told and told.